So I wasted over 3 years jumping between this programming language, that programming language, and I have absolutely nothing to show for it. So today I'm showing you the exact strategy that I wish I would have followed so that you don't make the same mistake and waste years of time. Let's get into it. So let me set the stage for where I was in my career. I started coding probably about 2 years after high school, and I was trying to get my first software engineering position. So what was the normal thing to do? It was to go online and look at all the job requirements for a software engineer. And that's what I did. So what I saw was multiple programming languages, and I fell into the well-rounded developer myth, which is I needed to know all of these different programming languages to really get my first job. And I was completely wrong. So when it comes to learning a new programming language, there's like this dopamine hit of I know what I'm doing, or I'm getting to learn something new. However, that's not always a good thing. This is what I did. My first month, probably month 1 to 3, or the first couple months, I only knew HTML and CSS, and I knew that wasn't enough to get a job. So my very first language that I tried to learn was Java. Why? I have no idea, but I feel like I looked around and Java seemed like the safe bet because everybody had some type of Java system at that time, or, it's just the thing to do. So I remember going on there, downloading Eclipse, that ID Eclipse. I don't know if you guys know about it or not, but downloaded Eclipse and I started learning Java. So I learned the variables, I learned how to do a function, I learned about all these simple concepts. And then I said, well, I see JavaScript's really popular. And JavaScript is not Java. At this time, I had no idea. And I said, I want to do web development, right? Why? I don't know. So I jumped to JavaScript. And guess what I learned? Variables, functions, for loop, if statement. But then I said, well, now I want to make mobile apps. Specifically, I want to make Apple apps. So what did I do? Hey, moms, can you get me a MacBook Pro for my high school graduation or whatever it was at the time? Hey, I want a MacBook Pro. So my mom got her tax money and got me a MacBook Pro. So I went on there, got me a little Xcode, right? And some Objective-C at the time. And I went in there and made a little mobile app. And I said, I don't want to do that anymore. There's this job that I want. So I'm actually going to start learning C#. Now, what you'll notice about all these different things is I was literally learning the same concepts every time I restarted. So I literally stayed in the beginner phase for probably more than a year because I was just learning the same thing. I was learning the same variables, just how to do it in this language or that language. But the concept of creating a variable is the same throughout them all, right? It's to store a value, point blank, period, right? Same thing with functions. It's to call a function so it does a block of code. It was the same in all of these languages that I switched to. But the thing is I was spending so much time switching that I wasn't learning anything. I was just doing the same thing in 5 different languages. So the real problem with this is you don't get any deep knowledge. You don't build any projects that are worth anything. I was doing the same tutorials. I was doing the to-do list app in all of these different languages, which didn't help because I was essentially doing the exact same thing. And as we all know, the to-do list, the calculator, these things are fine for learning, but if you do it 5 different times, it's kind of redundant and you're wasting time. So my portfolio stayed empty. I never really built anything beyond tutorials because after that tutorial was over, my mind went blank. And by switching through all these languages, I was just hoping that something would just click. And all of a sudden, I get programming now. I understand. I really do get it. And then just become a wizard. That's what I was hoping for. It doesn't happen like that. I don't know if you know, but it doesn't happen like that. I had a very shallow understanding. I remember getting a software engineering interview, and it was a whiteboard interview. And I completely choked. That was probably the worst interview of my life. I really stood up there and I forgot what the question was, but it was something along the lines of do something with this linked list. I had no idea what a linked list was because I was doing the same thing over and over again. I had no idea how that worked. And I stood up there in front of a whiteboard and wrote some stuff down that I knew was 100% incorrect. So the thing is that I was learning syntax. I wasn't actually learning problem solving with code. I couldn't debug anything effectively in like any language because I wasn't used to like the specific errors of the language, what's more prone to go wrong over something else, something like a JavaScript. I could get through something and it could have some type of error that has to do with because it's dynamically typed. Well, not with TypeScript now, you can kind of do that. But back then when I was learning it, it was, something could break because of some type of type error and I wouldn't know, where something like Java is more safe from those things. So that's not a place that I would look because I really didn't know the language deep enough. I was always feeling like a beginner. I really lost confidence because I felt like I wasn't learning anything. I didn't really know anything except for these random syntaxes and me thinking at the time that I knew all of these different languages when in reality, I didn't know all of these different languages. I wasn't stacking up languages. I was literally the beginner of all the languages for years. So this actually kind of delayed my start for getting into tech, and I missed opportunities, like I said, because I wasn't job ready. So now I'm going to give you the turning point. This is where I had an aha moment. It was when COVID hit and it was before COVID, but I started to really get into stocks. No, that had to be. It was when COVID hit and I started to get really into stocks. And so I made this app in whatever language I was using at the time. And that's where it really clicked on how to solve a specific problem with a language, whether or not it was the best language or not to solve that problem with. It actually made me have a realization that now I know where I need to go in order to get this whole programming thing down. So the language that I committed to at that time was C# because the company that I was working for used C#. So with that being said, I built my apps in C#. I built everything that I wanted in C#. Was it the best thing to do? Probably not. Because if you know, that language is a little bit bigger of an enterprise language that companies use when they have bigger, larger systems. And I was using it for a glorified calculator. All right. But needless to say, that's when it clicked. And that was years later. So another fear that I had was, what if I don't pick the right one? And let me let you in on a little secret. There is no right one. Now, I'm not saying just be crazy and go and build stuff in assembly or stuff like that. But what I am saying is you pick one of the popular languages and you learn that to a really deep degree, you'll be able to switch and transition more fluently and understand the language because you've already really dove deep into another language. So now the strategy that I would follow if I knew what I knew now, I would pick one language based on your career goal. So if you want to be a web dev, JavaScript's going to be your best bet. If you're going for, something in data analytics, data engineering, Python's probably going to be your go-to. Back end, you can do things like C#, Java, Go. You're going game development, C#, and things like that. So don't just go based on what's hot. Go based on what you actually want to do. The second step is going to be commit to at least 6 to 12 months minimum with that language. Set a non-negotiable timeline, and then track your hours weekly and aim for whatever you can do, but just try to make it consistent throughout the week. Follow this project progression. The first 1 to 2 months, do your beginner projects. This is after you've learned the syntax and all the basic stuff. Beginner projects, do the calculator, do the to-do app. Those are beginner projects to get you more used to the syntax and just using it to solve a problem. 3 to 4 months after that, you want to do some type of intermediate project. So something like a full CRUD application with a database. And then be 5 to 6 and kind of beyond, you want to be building job ready projects, something that you'd put on your resume, something that solves a real problem. And then you can also kind of dabble with doing some open source projects or even then what I think is the most impressive would be building your own product that will have real users with real value. That's probably the best way to stand out in order to get a job. Another thing that you probably want to do is stick to one resource for all of these. If that's YouTube University, Codecademy, there's a lot of good things out here at the Odin Project. So you want to choose one type of resource, one type of like documentation site. You want to stop tutorial hell by building majority of the time. Tutorials really in that first 1 to 2 months after that to-do list and that calculator, drop the tutorial and struggle through it. It's going to help you in the long run. So now I'm going to give you an actionable checklist. So the first thing you want to make sure is choose the right language for you. How do you choose a language? I'll go over it again. Web development, you want to learn JavaScript. Data and machine learning, Python, mobile, Kotlin, Swift, backend systems, something like Go, Java. You can do C# as well. For game development, you're going to want to do C# with Unity or C++, right? So this is when you're going to know you're kind of good with a specific language. Can you build a full problem from scratch? Can you debug without Googling every single error? Can you explain your code to someone else? This is very important, especially in the real work environment. Do you have 2 to 3 portfolio projects, or what I would say is one really big one? And then if you can do all of these different things with your first language or have done all of these things, then I would say at that point, you can start to learn your second language. So the key of all of this is the language that you actually learn doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's about the depth that you go to in that language. Mastery is going to be variety every single time. Jack of all trades, throw that shit out the window. You really need to be a master of one. All right. To be honest, the employers are only going to care about what you have built and not how many languages you know. Because if you can build something in one language, you could probably build it in another, period. So leave me a comment about which programming language you are committing to in the next 6 months to a year. Subscribe to the channel, and love, peace, and chicken grease.